G'day, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. I'm your co-host, Peter V.S. Bond. By day, I'm the Vice President of Retail Strategy at Power Reviews, a major metropolitan consumer-centric software company. By night, I fight a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way. No, I don't leap tall buildings in a single bound, but I think I know a little bit about e-commerce. If I know a little bit, this guy knows a lot. My co-host, a veteran CPG industry icon, and an entrepreneur in his own right. He's virtually omnipresent in the omnichannel thought leadership arena. He's so famous, he joins the likes of Cher and Madonna in being known by his first name. Please join me in welcoming my co-host, Shri Rajagopalan. Shri, good to be with you again.
Likewise, Peter, thank you so much. You're too funny, by the way. I didn't know that you had comedy in your future life as well. So that's definitely an option for a second career. Should the world of e-commerce, which not work out, which is not going to happen anyway. But
well, I grew up in the neighborhood in Toronto with Mike Myers, so comedy's kind of in the blood.
There you go. Awesome. Good to hear. I felt like we had such a great time last week when we chatted. We experimented for the first time by having a guest on our conversation here with John Jessup from Reputation Studio. I felt we had an awesome conversation on just brand reputation. It would be awesome if we could replicate that somewhere in the future.
Yeah, I agree with you. I got a lot of good feedback from John's participation. He really got into why brands need to be focused on their reputation. And yeah, we should do that again. And you know what, everybody? We're going to do it. And we're going to do it to the max. We're not going to just have a guest for one episode. We're going to introduce a multi-part episode. Shri, why don't you share with our audience the details? Because this is a big get from my perspective.
So we've got the man, the legend, the CPG industry icon coming up after this conversation today for 6 episodes focused on the omni-channel shopper, their behavior, their habits, how Amazon is leading the way or not, and then what to expect go forward for retail transformation. And that man is Brian Gildenberg, who's actually been a mentor to me as well. I've learned a ton from over the years. In his days at Cantor, kind of inspired me to speak free and try to be a transformation agent in the industry. So I'm looking forward. But Peter, I think before we go to next week, are we discussing the interesting word 3P marketplace this week?
I think we are, Shri, and I'll say before we get into that, I concur. Having Brian on is going to be tremendous. I was a devotee of his Retail Soundbites podcast. And I know that as he's recently joined Omnicom, he's going to have some really exciting things to share with us. So yeah, let's do talk about 3P marketplaces. If anyone has shopped on Amazon, you're used to seeing products mostly being, or at least in the past, mostly coming from Amazon. But now you see other buying options, and products are being sourced from not Amazon's warehouse, but some other location. So what's that all about? That's what we're going to try to explore today and understand why brands would go down the route of a marketplace. So the first thing I think we need to do is ground our understanding on exactly what is 3P. What is a marketplace, Shri? And how is, while we're now thinking about Amazon, that's not really our first e-commerce foray into marketplaces. There have been some really big ones before that, haven't there?
Yeah, that word 3P marketplace, for some strange reason, even today in senior executives, it drives a question of what is the 3P marketplace? Why should I engage in it in the first place? Is it right for me? With brand equity erode, things of that nature. So hopefully that's what we're going to try and demystify very quickly in this conversation today, as well as read the article that will be in the attached, which is how you probably got here in the first place anyway. But, if I thought about what is a 3P marketplace, at some point in history, you have probably heard the word eBay, either transacted on it via purchasing something, somebody in your family bought something, a friend bought something, referred to it. And eBay was the first real workaround of a 3P marketplace. And that existed when the internet was first created about 20 years ago, early 2000s. It was fully a buzz. People were buying and selling things. No kidding, right? And people were buying and selling things in eBay. But the one that actually drives the maximum attention these days, and I was reading just yesterday or earlier this week, that has entered the US is the Chinese marketplace Alibaba, which changed shopping and retailing in China forever, because 50% of all retail in China is done via Alibaba, which is like a big number from an e-commerce penetration perspective. With over 1 million active sellers that kind of set their own price points within the portal, trading both B2C, B2B, like you can buy 500 units of a product wholesale at one time, bulk, single. It provides most sellers the opportunity to kind of buy and sell on their own terms by allowing multiple sellers to kind of share the same SKU. And from a consumer perspective, it also ensures the best value for the consumer. But there is a downside that I kind of have been following in the last 5, 7, 10 years on Amazon's 3P marketplace, which is there's been counterfeit sellers, fake goods coming on board, because the governance of the 3P marketplace is obviously not the same as the 1P marketplace, which is when Amazon buys a product directly from you. So that's the one watch out. But most marketplaces, eBay including, are cleaning up for this sort of situation where there's fake goods, counterfeit, things of that nature. And why would Amazon have it in the first place? To answer your question, it's there because it's a second chance for Amazon to drive further value for the consumer when they work with a brand or a CPG company and they don't feel that the value is what they want it to be for a variety of reasons. They allow it to be sold on the 3P marketplace where someone else sets the price, not the brand, not Amazon, and they see where that can go in terms of driving value for the consumer. And to me, it's also a financial margin, kind of almost close to guarantee for
Yep.
Amazon, because a certain percent of the transaction comes over to Amazon. And there's also a bunch of fees in addition to just the percent commission, for lack of a better word, that Amazon takes with minimum friction. And when you compare the investments Amazon has to make on the acquiring product size versus letting someone sell on their ecosystem, to me, the human capital that they need, large teams, et cetera, to negotiate, et cetera, they don't need that. So to me, it's a no-brainer why Amazon got into the 3P marketplace. But the most important them of all is they don't have to take physical possession of the inventory via purchase order, other than the FBA route.
Yeah, and that caused some problems, didn't during the pandemic, Shreen? You mentioned counterfeiting because there were a lot of people trying to sell PPEs on Amazon. They were gouging up the prices, and since it was all 3P, Amazon was trying to argue some measurable measure of deniability, and that's probably not what consumers want to hear. So we'll dig into that, but let's get back to
You
the
bet.
differences. Anyone who's worked with Amazon directly has heard the term vendor central. That's typically
Yep,
referred to as 1P. You want to walk us through what the nuances are between 1 and 3P,
you
why a
bet.
brand might want to go 3P, and if they'd had been 1P in the past, why can they even go 3P?
Absolutely.
What are the requirements, restrictions, and what have you that Amazon has set?
Absolutely, Peter. So first, let's address what's the difference and what do those two words mean, 1P and 3P. 1P is when Amazon buys products, SKUs, units, whatever it may be from a manufacturer in bulk quantity via negotiated rates, a trade rate, a commitment from the brand side to invest in media, acquires the product, and is primarily responsible for the listing and the sale of the product. So they've taken physical inventory of the product by a purchase order.
Yep.
3P, as we just said, they don't take physical inventory of the product from a purchase order perspective. The one that's actually doing the sale via Seller Central, which is a different type of accounting for the 3P marketplace on Amazon, owns the end-to-end seed through distribution of the product. So
Mhm.
that's a massive difference. 1P, Amazon owns the end-to-end once they've acquired the product from you. 3P, you own it end-to-end, start right from manufacturing through fulfillment with the consumer. Of course, you're free to use any 3P provider that you want from a fulfillment perspective, and
Yep.
the most likely candidate is going to be Amazon's FBA service. But that's the primary difference. If Amazon takes possession of your inventory via negotiation with you and in bulk quantity to sell themselves, so that's the primary difference. I think a very good question that arises is, oh my gosh, if I've already listed on 1P, can I sell 3P in the future? The question I'd ask is, if you've sold on 1P before and you want to move to 3P, like there has to be a strong driver for why you want to move to 3P. If you failed and the product has been delisted multiple times, you got to examine what that is first and see by going to the 3P marketplace whether you can overcome that. And the most likely reason that many brands and SKUs want to move over to the 3P marketplace is really from a price perspective, the instability of the price model on the 1P, where the price is really set by a so-called algorithm, whereas on 3P, as a seller of record, they get to set their own price point and they set their own terms really for the most part. And I think that's the number one question you got to ask yourself. If you've gotten delisted, if you haven't been successful, is that the reason you're coming over? And if you do you have the strength to do seed through fulfillment, distribution, end to end, and totally master it? Now, if you're a small startup or a small brand that's really getting started in this space, 3P is the right choice for you, because you want to make sure Amazon's not going to buy product in bulk from you because you don't exist in retail distribution anyway, and Amazon prefers only brands that exist in retail distribution.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would ask the question why and if you can overcome it.
Yeah, so that kind of begs my next question. I was going to say, I'm used to seeing these small, nascent, emerging brands in 3P because they can't get into the Amazon distribution center. So I understand that, but why does a big scale brand? I mean, why would a Procter and Gamble or a Unilever or a Kraft Heinz? Why would they want to be in 3P?
The number one reason I tell large brands why you should look at the Amazon 3P marketplace closely is because they already exist in the 3P marketplace. And the most likely reason they already exist in the 3P marketplace and are being sold by a ton of sellers, in some cases over 100, is because of their own distribution policies, working with distributors and causing distribution leakage. By getting listed yourself in the 3P marketplace, you can do a much better job of managing that and preserving consistent value for the consumer rather
Mhm.
than ups and downs and crests and troughs and pricing, etc. So you start with asking yourself a question. Again, the most likely reason you're not on 1P anymore, you're looking for this change, is because of your average selling price. If your average selling price is low and it's below $6 a unit, which Peter and I concur on, and that results in it constantly getting delisted, or the Amazon word crap can't realize any profit, due to which it vanishes. You spend 4 days realizing that, you put a bunch of money into SEM that you budgeted for, which can do nothing since the product listing isn't there. Those kind of challenges you can overcome by going to 3P, since again, you control the end to end. You can set the value for the consumer. You can choose even cheaper options to fulfill the product. You don't have to do a 2-day prime badge. There are so many subcategories, Peter, where fulfillment tomorrow morning or in 2 days, the consumer is not even looking for it, especially in a subscription model. In a
Yep.
subscription model, once they subscribe, they just want to see it at a certain time every month. They're not asking you for 2-day shipping. And if you're a good planner, you can easily do 5-day ground shipping, get rid of that problem, and actually benefit the consumer. The one difference I see between 1P and 3P, though, for a large brand is, if you take an innovation and launch it on the 3P marketplace, odds are you're going to do a much better job of managing equity of the brand to begin with, but it'll take longer to scale because you're in the business of single transactions, whereas with 1P, you're in the business of truckloads or case loads or case packs and things of that nature. It will test your patience. But I think of your 3P listing as a way to exist on Amazon and still enjoy the luxury of most of what it has to offer, which is the search, the product listing, SEO, ratings and reviews. Most importantly, without the challenge of negotiating your trade rates. And my gosh, having been in the selling ecosystem for a while now, sitting across customers, retailers, negotiating, what a luxury that is, Peter.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, I certainly can attest to, which was that whole issue of getting those low price items visible to consumers. I was totally happy with the add-on item strategy that Amazon implemented a couple of years ago, so that I could buy the right size package that I wanted. I didn't really want to buy dry fried jalapeno peppers in a 2-pound bag that'll sit on my shelf for 4 years. So being able to get the size you want is critically important. I can see why the 3P can be particularly valuable for those low cost items. So I've decided now that I want to get in the 3P game. How do I do it? What are the best practices?
So before I get into that, Peter, what I wanted to point out is I think most consumers are actually like you. Amazon trained consumers that 2-day shipping is the norm. You should expect it in 2 day, and then experimented with one day, which really for the most part, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's very inconsistent and tends to confuse the consumer more what's truly one day versus 2 day shipping. But there are many subcategories, like you gave an example of pickles, where more than 2 day shipping, 2 day shipping works perfectly fine. So, excuse me, I don't want to misrepresent the fact that everything needs to be on 2 day shipping. You are so correct, Peter. But let's say now, to get back to your question, you're getting into the 3P marketplace. What's the best way for a CPG manufacturer to do this and why? In my mind, Peter, I think you and I have debated this over the years many times. If you're a CPG manufacturer of any scale, and by scale, I don't mean of the billion-dollar global brands that I've had the fortune of touching. I mean, if you've even 40, 50 million, just you achieved some scale, odds are the strength of your success is based on two things. One is your brand equity, and the second is the optimization of your supply chain to drive down cost and hopefully putting it more into the value for the consumer via the product. So the strength that you have is putting products in cases and getting it to a retail customer in cases, and not the strength you don't have is dismantling those cases and selling units as single units.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you get into the 3P marketplace, you have to ask yourself, is that my forte? If you're a D2C brand or a B2B brand, you're doing this anyway. So you're going to have a field day on the 3P marketplace and you're clearly advantaged. But if you don't have both these skill sets, you're not a profound D2C brand or B2B brand, I would suggest very strongly you partner with several third parties who are expert sellers on the 3P marketplace, will work with you and even solve that age old problem you have, which is if you want to turn over physical possession of your goods via case packs to someone else, they will acquire it from you and work a plan and a situation with you where even though you are really doing the marketing of the seller central account, the seller central account will be in their name, the legal possession of the inventory is moved over, your risks are low. I mean, don't try to necessarily jump into areas where you don't have strengths on one day, especially in such a big endeavor. Learn, and maybe in a year's time, you can do it anyway with your supply chain. All that
Yeah.
said, long term, it's probably best that you acquire the strength, but start with a third party.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Shri, and sounds like one of the requirements, if you're going to succeed, is to figure this out correctly. What are some of the other kind of must-dos that if you don't address and you don't solve very quickly, your chances of success are greatly diminished?
Yeah, so again, start by asking yourself the question, why do you want to go into the 3P marketplace and be in the business of each's transactions? Because that's what it is. Of course, you could go into the 3P marketplace and sell in case packs, but today, largely the 3P marketplace on Amazon tends to be a D2C business for Amazon. Consumers are buying each's, they're not buying case packs, whereas Alibaba has done a brilliant job of making Alibaba.com both a D2C and a B2B marketplace. And Amazon will get there someday. So you got to ask a question why you're there. And you're going to find more often than not the reason that you're there, as we were kind of opening the opening the answer to that question earlier before, is because of the price point of your product, the ASP, the value to the consumer, along with the trade rate negotiation that you have to do in a year and you're not happy with it. And you could also be a startup listing a SKU, and Amazon usually will not purchase a new SKU for 1P unless it's been around in retail for quite a while, or if you're an existing partner of Amazon and they want to take the innovation from you, they're going to ask you for your media plan, and perhaps you want to do a test and learn, and you're not going to find 1P as interested because they're in the business of consistent retail, like most retailers. So that's what I would say. Like that's the early must do. But then the the very second part of that is you have to follow the fundamentals. The energy you bring to your 1P listing, that's the kind of same energy you got to bring to your 3P listing, which is you got to invest in SEM, carefully planned assortment. Do you want to sell niches, case packs? Are there unique bundles you want to sell? What is it that you're selling at what price points? Are you giving value to a consumer if you're bundling things, etc.? The quality of your digital shelf, are you putting in the A+ pages you would have on 1P, above the fold, below the fold? What's your plan to drive UGC, a user generated content, one that Peter and you and I talk about all the time, right, Peter? Ratings
All
and
the time.
reviews, customer service, are you answering questions, FAQs? And again, don't forget, most important, fulfillment, FBA versus FBM option.
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's say I've solved the who's going to pack my consumer box. It's sitting there on the loading dock. It's ready to go. What are my fulfillment options and what should I be thinking about to be successful in 3P?
And I'm sure, Peter, you've experienced both these versions I'm about to talk about, which is really your two options are FBA or FBM. FBA is when you partner with Amazon in this unique service where Amazon becomes the fulfillment agent for you. FBA, fulfillment by Amazon. But to be very clear, when they take possession of the inventory, it's not via purchase order. They're merely a fulfillment agent storing, receiving inbound for the purpose of product exiting their warehouse, and there are storage charges if it doesn't turn around fast enough. They are not acquiring physical inventory, to be very clear. FBM is fulfillment by merchant. When you decide, I'm not using FBA, I want to use another third party, I want to build this capability in-house within my supply chain, and you are responsible for all aspects of the fulfillment from scratch, including where the product is sitting, the storage of the product, boxing, bundling, unboxing, prepping, bagging, making sure products don't get damaged when they get transited. On the FBA side, Amazon takes accountability and responsibility for a lot of those things. So it's a good question to ask yourself, which one should I go with? Our personal recommendation that Peter and I would concur with is, if you're starting out in this journey for the first time, and again, you're not a D2C or a B2B provider and supply chain is not your strength, it's best to go with FBA. Once you learn this and you start building muscle power around this, FBA tends to be expensive. I don't think we can deny that. It's a flat percent of every transaction. There are fees in and around it that you usually cannot manage easily. Strongly suggest you start building that capability yourself. So you start with FBA, move over to FBM eventually. And for some brands that are doing well and scaling, I would even recommend, if you find yourself so successful on FBA, ask Amazon how you open up a conversation on the 1P side and try to see if they can even take physical possession of your inventory.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Sri. Uh, they've built a pretty powerful logistics system, and yeah, it costs you a
So
little
right,
more,
Peter.
but you want your brand to succeed right out of the gate. You don't want to be riddled with fulfillment issues that are going to give you bad seller ratings. It's going to negatively impact your performance on the site, and it's going to diminish your sales opportunities. So get it right with FBA. And when you think you've understood all the components of fulfillment, you can either switch over to fulfillment by merchant, or you can, as you said, think about going to 1P. That's
You bet.
absolutely a thing. So let's talk a little bit about the hidden costs associated with all of this. What are the kind of the costs that brands need to be aware of as they're thinking about getting into the marketplace?
First of all, Peter, it's hilarious that we are discussing hidden costs, because I don't know of any business model that doesn't have hidden costs, right? I mean, unless Peter, you do. So
I do, but they're
um,
hidden. So
they're
sorry.
hidden. So we're back to square one, right?
Yeah.
So if we don't address this, we'll be doing a big disservice to the industry. So in any business model, right, the more you execute, the more you learn. Your knowledge is power, and the more knowledge you get, you figure out, oh my gosh, I've got this new fees. So there are plenty of unexpected fees you're going to have on FBA. Again, if you're not a D2C, B2B brand, there are going to be terminologies that you're going to that are going to come like an ocean and a tsunami at you that you're going to have to master. And when you add all those up, they can be several double-digit percentages of your P&L that you didn't plan for, and sometimes insurmountable in the first place. That's one side of the fence. And then on the other side of the fence in FBM, there could be poor fulfillment by third parties, a lot of returns coming back, bad customer service experiences, product is coming back damaged. And the worst thing that can happen there is bad ratings and reviews. Because the one thing I know you and I absolutely hold hands on is bad ratings and reviews equal to erosion of brand trust, equal to failure of your product in even in the short run. So what I would say is, other things you got to think about is, if you don't stay ahead of your SEO, SEM, which in the 1P model, you're going to hold hands with AMG, Amazon, even though it tends to be self-service because of the numbers and the scale, it's going to be agency based. In this world, it's going to be largely you. You're going to self-serve your media, SEM. So if you're not on top of it on a daily basis, you're not strategizing, you don't wake up with the hunger to let me optimize my search every day and on my Seller Central account via AMG, those things can get very exhausting very quickly. And then what about the infrastructure to answer customer questions, consumer questions, right? Keeping up with FAQs, all of these can get challenging too. But it comes back to the same thing, Peter. If you're going to enter the 3P marketplace, there should be a good reason for it. And once you've answered that reason and you said, I got to do this, build a purpose around it and stick to it.
Yeah, I'd say back to your point about having the infrastructure to answer just simple questions from your consumers. If you haven't already done that because of the organic growth from consumers just coming to your site and asking those questions, getting into 3P and Amazon is going to absolutely require that you build some expertise in that area. So Shri, I've just decided, you know what? 3P is the right thing for me. But, you know, I work for this big consumer packaged goods company that is used to sending truckloads to retailer distribution centers. How do I convince them that I should get into the 3P game where I'm delivering onesies and twosies to individual consumers?
So, Peter, number one suggestion, please don't be the egotistical person, folks, that says, I'm the digital e-commerce leader, I'm the digital leader, I know it better than you, 3P is non-negotiable. Treat your request with senior management to get into 3P with the same respect, discipline you would, the thorough exercise you would do in seeking approval or investment in any other angle. Research the 3P marketplace, get the data, understand your opportunity, get the insights on your competition, read a bunch of articles, third-party white papers, and then use all of that to build a business case why you need it. This is exactly what you do to seek investment anywhere else, including even building a display in store. So the process and the discipline should be very similar, especially if this is the first time for your company. And then come back and visit. What is the reason you want to go to the 3P marketplace once you have a business case? Odds are, again, it's going to be because you have a low ASP, you're having a problem to control it. So you need a solid framework around, if you go to the 3P marketplace, how are you going to manage that better? And your price points give the consumer value that the consumers are starting to get used to. And yet the volatility, it goes away, just gets erased from the ecosystem. And your plan must be very comprehensive and fully loaded, which means you got to be a partner with your CMO, especially on SEO and SEM. Because you miss that, good luck. And then human capital required to support this doesn't mean you hire 50 people. I treat any e-commerce investment with the same rigor and depth of any investment request I have ever had to cater to in the brick and mortar or any other piece of the e-commerce ecosystem. So that's what I would suggest.
You mentioned earlier that primary reasons to consider going to from 1P to 3P were the price volatility and just the general low price points of the items and being able to deliver onesies. Are there any others that come to mind as being major reasons why you might want to shift from a 1P to a 3P strategy?
Yeah, Peter, that's actually a very good question because I've been kind of looking through this quite a few years and I have pivoted for some brands and SKUs to 3P. To me, the ASP still remains the number one reason why, because you're constantly getting delisted or quote unquote crapped out by Amazon. We've already discussed what crap is earlier, can't realize any profit, aka delist. But the one other thing that comes to mind is if you're hungry for data, if you're comfortable with the business model where the retailer acquires, takes, we talked about physical possession of your inventory via PO, you don't get the first party data. You don't get to have that consumer relationship. But if you want to do test and learns, engage the consumer, follow up with them, and you want to do better in innovation as an example, know which SKU will work, and you want to build that one-on-one consumer relationship. And Peter, you tell me, Peter, in 2020, which brand shouldn't be doing that? Then 3P marketplace is another good option for you to experiment with the scale of Amazon's awesome ecosystem.
Yeah. You know, I'm a big data hound, Shri. So
You
that
bet.
is always, that's actually the top of my list. I don't want to cede my information. It's one of the many reasons in a relatable situation why so many manufacturers have been moving away from advertising on Facebook. Yeah, it's a big platform,
Well said. Well
but
said.
for companies like P&G that have targeted personalization engines like Hawkeye, they need that third-party data to power their engine, and Facebook doesn't share it.
Well said.
And similarly, there's a lot of data that Amazon isn't sharing to its first-party vendor
So
central manufacturers. So yeah, that to me is a major reason why I'd really consider 3P. So last question I have for you is, we've kind of skated around the issue because we've talked about fulfillment, we've talked about picking the items. Let's just talk more specifically about the supply chain. What are we going to need our internal supply chain to do to really make this work? Because without them walking hand in hand, I kind of think that it's going to be a big flop.
you are absolutely right, Peter. Without your supply chain core in the center of your transformation to putting listing SKUs and selling them and moving them on the third party marketplace is a very bad idea. I personally know many executives that keep supply chain out of it because they feel my supply chain is built for yesterday. It's not built for the future, but I strongly recommend against that. Your supply chain has built strength, understanding your product better than anybody, such as the size of your product. When I say size, I mean the actual size of the bottle you may be selling product in, or the packaging size you may be selling in, what the density, the weight of that package, things of that nature. So to me, the role of your supply chain is significant. Moving to a 3P or starting in 3P means you own the consumer fulfillment, whether it's FBO or FBM. And then transformation includes understanding shipping rates, partnerships with USPS, FedEx, UPS. These partnerships already exist with your supply chain. Then inner boxing, outer boxing for your product, and then any marketing collateral that has to be put into the shipper, the ability to produce invoices is required when an order comes in, shipment notices, connecting it to email for the consumer to be able to track where that transaction results in actual fulfillment, where it is with a third party carrier, are they going to get it at the right time, text
Wow.
message notifications on that, inbound, outbound, both of them are like massive different words in this ecosystem versus just bulk case pack shipping products to a retailer warehouse, because fees are created in the process of you're missing one each out of hundreds of cases you may be selling to FBA. And then the prep required to sell on FBA. Only your supply chain leaders are going to truly understand this with the depth that they need. And even if you choose to use a third party to your supply chain, it's still only a supply chain people that are going to get into you, most likely your SAP master data, be able to pull the product record from the SAP master file of the product record and be able to get all that information on packaging size, all the different ingredients on the package, the weight of the package can be bundled together. And they have a fantastic partnership usually with procurement and shippers and with these third-party shippers, shipping companies such as UPS and FedEx.
Yep.
And that partnership will result in better management and ROI on your P&L. Hope that
I'll
helps
tell you,
me. That a lot.
I'll tell you, Shrey, it sounds like there's a lot that needs to be done, but with the right method, the right approach, and including all of these different partners, internal and external, brands can do this and they can do it successfully and they can do it at scale. So I want to thank you for kind of walking us through that today. I'll remind all our guests that you can follow Shrey and me on LinkedIn and YouTube by looking at the hashtag below the screen here. It's hashtag Shrey and PVSB. That's where you can follow us. And I'll remind everybody that next week we begin our 6-part series with CPG industry knowledge icon Brian Gildenberg, who is part of the Omnicom group. He's going to be joining us for discussion about living in an omni-channel world. So
I can't wait, Peter. This is going to be so much fun.
yeah, I know we're like giddy school children. We're so excited about this. So with that, I'm just going to say, Shrey, as always, thank you for joining me on this journey. I
Likewise,
love
Peter.
these little
Thank you so
chats.
much.
Best part of the week, right? Really, really
Having
great
fun
fun.
doing this in the process and hopefully helping the industry learn and transform.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week with Mr. Gildenberg. Get ready for a wild ride. It's going to be a lot of fun. Until
Thank you,
then,
Peter.
thanks from Shrey and PVSB. Take care.
Adios.